Okay, I'm gonna put in the chat just to make it easy, a copy of the offer scenario. And this is the thing that I emailed last night. But just for easy reference, I'm also now going to share my screen. So let me see here. Share screen. Okay, when I share my screen, can you guys see MLS?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just going to jump over real quick to the Google sheet that I put in the chat. So this is our subject property for this week. So it's a 4-bed, 2-bath house in Mequon. This went up on the market last week. It's already under contract, and that's fine. Like, it doesn't really matter if it's under contract or not. But why this one is interesting is I called the listing agent to see what the traffic and the activity was like on the house, so we could try to use that as some background information for when you write your offer. So the house is in Mequon. I'm just looking right now. Let's do a quick. Okay, so here we go. 4-bed, 2-bath, about 1,800 square feet. Can somebody point out what year it was built? 1963. So knowing that, what is something that you're going to have to include with your offer, knowing the age of the house?
Lead paint.
Lead paint, right. And what's the year for that?
1978.
1978, yep. Okay. So in terms of just some of the information on the property, again, it's a 4-bed, 2-bath. It looks like they also have a den in the lower area. So that's probably somehow affiliated with the basement. The thing that I usually do is look to see if there's any private remarks that might help give us a little bit of an understanding as to what's going on closing wise, what's going on timing wise, and sorry. So the seller's just asking for 48 hours binding acceptance, not verifying the square footage. And then electronic earnest money is encouraged and available through trust funds. So those are at least some of the initial things that we know that the seller is asking for. So after our buyers have gone through the house, and let's just take a quick look at the inclusions. So you've got a lot of the standard appliances like the oven, the fridge, dishwasher, microwave, washer, dryer. The water softener's owned, so that's great. The iron curtain, so that's something that is typically used with a private well in addition to the water softener. And it doesn't say if it's owned or rented. So that actually is something that you would most likely call the listing agent to find out if it's owned. If it's owned, you can write it into the offer. If it's rented, you cannot. The window treatments, and then there's also some additional things in the lower level, like the fridge, microwave, pool table, garage, and basement workbench and shelving. So she's being pretty specific with what is included, which is great. But let's get into our buyer scenario. So I'm going to go back to my Google Doc. And after you called the listing agent and indicated my buyers are really interested in the property, they're going to be submitting an offer. Is there anything from a seller preference that you could share with me? So I would ask, like, is there a closing deadline or a preference? How is earnest money going to be delivered through trust funds? They've already stated that. So these are the things that our listing agent has indicated are important. A quick closing. They want as few contingencies as possible to net as much money as possible. And again, they prefer trust funds, which that's great. So when you did call the listing agent to find out a little bit more about those preferences above, You asked too, like, how was showing traffic, and why might understanding how busy the listing has been from a showing perspective, why is that important?
Maybe with like a price for offer.
Yeah, so I always like to ask, beyond the showing that we had today, has the schedule been pretty busy? Have the offers, or has the seller received any offers? And when you did talk to the listing agent, she indicated, yes, the sellers have received a few offers, and they have to make a decision by 5. So this is a realistic situation. This is actually what happened on this listing. The seller received an offer. Actually, this listing, let me look at my notes. They had 7 showings and they got 4 offers. That's actually pretty strong. And one of those offers had a 5-hour deadline. So when the listing agent notified all of the agents that had shown the property and indicated, like, we have an offer in hand, it has a quick deadline, agents literally had just a couple of hours to submit an offer if they wanted to do so for their buyers. So today, for our practice, I'm trying to make this as realistic as possible. And I've asked, if you're going to be going through and following up with an actual offer submission and you're sending it to me as if I'm the listing agent, usually I give folks until the next tomorrow morning, but today I'm asking for it by 5 o'clock because I really want you guys to try to be working within the time frame parameters that these agents really did in this situation. So our buyer profile, we've just got their names here, John and Jane Doe, and they really, really want this. They've looked at a few houses, they've written offers before, but they've lost out. The location's exactly where they want to be. The floor plan is exactly what they wanted. So because they've written a few other offers, they have maybe a little bit more confidence in some of the decisions that they're going to make. But sometimes too, when buyers have had like a little bit of practice and written other offers, they can act a little bit faster too, which is good because you're going to need to act fast in this situation. Our closing time frame, the buyers are flexible, but we know that the seller wants to close sooner versus later. So think about how you might craft an offer that is attractive to the seller from a quick perspective, but then also is something that will still work with your buyers. They have $7,000 in earnest money ready to go. And in previous offer practices, and even sometimes in team meeting, Charlie reiterates what typical accepted offers in terms of what buyers have included as earnest money. And earnest money is typically anywhere between 1% to 3% of the purchase price. Buyers can go higher if they want, but that's usually kind of the sweet spot where people are writing their offers. So 1% to 3%. So I've just taken the guesswork out of it for folks here, and I've indicated we have $7,000 ready to go. And your buyers would like a home inspection. They want a radon inspection, and they want the well and water tested. They've been pre-approved for up to $525,000 with a local credit union, and they're ready to do 15% as a down payment. And then this one too, so they've got some money available for either an appraisal gap or inspection coverage. And they're looking to you to give them recommendations as to what, if those types of things should be included in the offer or not. And one thing that I just realized I didn't put in here is we are going to write an offer as an agent of the buyer. So these guys have actually signed buyer agency. So they are in fact clients of yours, and therefore in the offer, we're going to be doing agent of the buyer. Make sense? Any initial questions? No? Okay, groovy. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time going into the offer itself, and I will though in a couple minutes, but in terms of the documents that you would want to submit with this offer, can anybody tell me what would be included in your offer packet? And beyond just the traditional offer to purchase document? What else would we be including in here?
Would you do buyer agency? Would you put?
You don't have, buyer agency is important to have signed, but you don't need to send that to the listing agent. That
Okay.
is something that you can just keep internally within KW, but that's a good question. What else might you want to submit with this offer? What kind of documents?
Addendum A and AC as well?
Yeah, so, oh, Maggie, I'm putting you up on the chat. Yeah, so addendum A is an addendum that gives you some additional kind of contingencies to write into your offer. And in our instance with this property, we know that our seller or our buyer would like to have the well tested. And I'm just going to show you again, like where you find the type of water and the type of sanitary system. It's all right here. So we've got the house is on municipal sewer, but it's on a private well, and your buyers want to have the well and the well water tested. So you would use addendum A. Ashley, you mentioned also addendum AC. So addendum AC is that document that is broken up into like 3 main sections. If you'd like to have some type of inspection repair coverage, like your buyer is willing to put forth a little bit of money, in terms of curing or fixing any items that come up in the inspection. The second section of that addendum AC is for an appraisal gap. So if your buyer has some money that they might be able to apply or put towards any deficiency between the purchase price and an appraised price, they could come to closing with cash. So the appraisal gap. And then the third section of that addendum, and I'm just going to pull it up, is the escalation clause. Let's just go here. I'm going to create a new one real quick. Can you guys still see my zip forms? Residential. So I'm in zip forms and I'm opening up the residential offer packet. And once I do that, again, this is in zip form training, but if folks want zip form training, we've got a slew of videos on YouTube that'll take you through that. But here, once I've selected the appropriate type of offer that I'm writing, it'll automatically add these document templates to your zip form folder so you can start to draft your offer. So I said I was going to pull up addendum AC just to show you again what sections that includes. But includes an inspection contingency. So again, this is if the buyer is willing to cover up to a certain dollar amount in repairs, you would use this. If there's an appraisal gap, you would use this document, or if there was an escalation clause that you wanted to add, you would use this document. I'll leave it up to you as you're writing your offer to determine whether or not some of these things you do want to in fact include. But we know if we go back to our offer kind of scenario, they do want the home inspection, they do want a radon inspection, and they want the well and the well water tested. They do have a little bit of money to cover any type of appraisal gap or an inspection coverage. So just something to keep in mind as you're crafting your offer. So I'm just going to get into the main offer document. And before I get into that, so I asked what documents would you include as part of your offer? So we have the offer to purchase, we have addendum A. If you choose to include addendum AC, that would also be part of your offer. But what other 2 documents would you also need to make sure that are signed and submitted as part of your offer? So lead paint, we know that the home was built prior to 1978. Who's got this here? Look at Maggie, lead paint, yep. And what I'll remind folks too is when you have the lead paint addendum that is signed by the listing agent, that is signed by the sellers, that is also signed by the buyer's agent as well as by the buyers. But don't forget, and I'm going to pull this up, you can get all of these documents, the addendum S and the condition report from MLS. So here, just real quickly, the sellers have signed addendum S indicating that the home was built prior to 1978 and that there might be evidence of lead paint in the home. The listing agent has signed it. You, the buyer's agent, will also need to sign it. Your buyer needs to indicate whether or not they want to have a lead paint inspection or whether or not they want to waive the inspection. And I just, in our market, I would say 99.999% of, don't quote me on the numbers, but waive the lead paint inspection. But then you also have to make sure that your buyers sign this as well. And something that we see, or at least I've seen quite a bit as a listing agent, is addendum S has been signed by all necessary parties, but nothing has been checked. So when that happens, as a listing agent, I always just call up the buyer's agent who submitted the offer, just to ask, like, or just to point out, there was no box checked on addendum S. It's not anything that we need to fix at this point, but there might be, if we choose to go into negotiations, that might be something that wouldn't be included in a counter offer, just to cover off on that particular contingency. And then the other document that gets included with your offer is the condition report. So the condition report is already signed by the seller. Your buyer also has to sign. By signing the condition report, it doesn't mean that the buyer agrees and has confirmed the items that have been disclosed in the condition report. This just indicates that the buyer has acknowledged that they have received a copy of the statement. Okay. Then there's one other item that if you are getting financing, or even if you're getting you have a cash buyer, there's one other item that would be included in your offer packet. What does anybody know what that last item might be? Look in my chat. So that last item would be, in fact, a copy of the pre-approval that the buyer has from the lender, or if this is a cash offer, ideally, in a competitive market, it is good to get a proof of funds in a similar fashion that you would get a pre-approval letter. Get that proof of funds indicating that the buyer has the cash on hand to cover the purchase. You would also include that along with your offer. Now, when you submit the offer too, you've got a few documents that need to be included. It is very much preferred to make sure that those documents are all combined into one PDF, and you can combine them into one PDF via zip form. So it sometimes gets a little clunky, but if folks have questions or need help with that, let me know. But I'm just going to get right into, we aren't going to get through all of the offer documents, but I'm just going to start with our good old offer to purchase. So you guys can choose to follow along. If you've already started filling this in, great. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put our date. We're submitting our offer today. And what am I including on lines 1 and 2? I said, or I should actually rephrase that. What should I cross out on lines 1 and 2 as it pertains to the type of agent that I am? So we know that we have a buyer agency signed, so they're our
Also have
clients.
Agent of seller listing firm
Correct.
and an agent of buyer and seller.
Yeah, so you just put a big old strike through on that. Oop. Hold on a second. Okay, then let's start getting into the offer. So the buyer, this is where we're going to put our buyer's names, John Doe. We have a second buyer, Jane Doe. We put in our property address, 11416 North Glenwood Drive. And then this is in the blank of blank. Does anyone know what I might be putting in line 6? This house is in the what of what? Okay, I'll help you.
Is it
It's in
like
the
city of?
of Mequon. Yep. So if this was in like the village of Thiensville or the town of, I don't know, Auburn, I don't know. That's where you would put in the blank of blank. So like city of Mequon, city of Milwaukee, village of Germantown. You can see and you can understand or you learn what type of municipality it is by going to MLS. And there's a line here in MLS that'll say what type of municipality. So village, town, city. I don't know what some of the other ones might be, but you get the gist. So we're in the city of Mequon, and it's in the county of what? Where do I find the county information? If you don't know it.
Should be on there, correct? Or the
Yep,
tax.
good old, yep,
tax-
good old MLS, right at towards the top. It's in the county of Ozaki. Okay. So we're gonna go back here. It's in the city of Mequon, county of Ozaki. Okay. Now, this is where, if you guys are going to be actually submitting your offer by today and doing the practice, your purchase price really should be indicative of, one, the value that your buyer believes the house to be worth, but then also two, remember you're in competition, right? So it's just something to keep in mind as you think about how you would craft your offer. I would probably pull comps in the area just to see what homes have sold for, what the asking price was, what they sold for within the last 3 months, ideally. That'll also help give you a better understanding as to whether or not a home could appraise at that purchase price. But for practice today, I'm gonna say the asking price was 484.9. Let's, for practice today, I'm gonna say we're gonna offer 501. So $501,000. You just have to plug it here in the line and then it'll automatically populate into words above. I'll leave it up to folks as to what they want to include. If they want to take everything from MLS and plop it in the inclusion list, that's something that you want to make sure that you review with your buyer and you understand what it is, in fact, they want to include in the offer. But you know what I'm going to do? I'm not going to take everything. I don't want the pool table. I don't want the garage and basement workbench and shelving. I just want the appliances. So I've just copied that out right out of MLS and plopping it here. Not included in the purchase price. So this is going to be at the seller's personal property will always, it should always be a default into your zip form templates. But I don't want the seller's personal property, and then I don't want these additional items. I want them to take these things out. And it's good to specify what you don't want included, because when you go through your final walkthrough and there's still a pool table in there, you go back to your offer just to make sure that you did in fact include that as an exclusion, and you start talking to the listing agent just to confirm Mr. and Mrs. Seller are going to be removing some of the items that we had listed as exclusions. Okay, so here is in the offer to purchase, just a list of definitions as to what a fixture might be. So make sure you familiarize yourself with that. We're not going to read it. And then in terms of our offer deadline or our binding acceptance deadline, so binding acceptance means the offer is officially approved if both parties have signed and accepted the offer. So we know that for this practice, and it actually in real life, agents didn't have a lot of time to get these offers in, and the binding acceptance was pretty fast. So if we know that offers are due today at 5, I would probably put as my binding acceptance. And if your buyers are okay with it, you can put through the end of the day just to give them, the seller, a little bit more wiggle room or a little bit more time to think. Or you could actually put something as specific as like 6 p.m. today. So I'm going to be nicer than what that other buyer who submitted the offer with a tight timeline. I'll give the sellers until the end of day today. And that if you don't put a specific time on line 40, it automatically goes until 11:59 p.m. of the date that you've indicated here on line 40. Okay, now acceptance. Oh, I haven't ever really covered this, but let's just do it real quick. What if your buyers have submitted an offer and everything's signed by your buyers, and prior to the binding acceptance deadline, they decide, I don't want the house anymore, please withdraw the offer? Does anyone know how you would officially withdraw the offer? And so take it out of contention. So you need to, you can deliver the withdrawn request in a couple of different ways. You can call the listing agent and indicate, my buyers have changed their mind. We are officially withdrawing the offer. You can send it via text. You can send it via email. And the way I would do it and the way that I have done it, I immediately call as soon as I've had my conversation with my buyers and they're sure that is in fact what they want to do. I call the listing agent and let them know my buyers have officially withdrawn their offer. I will be sending you a follow-up email indicating such, but I like to call first. And then I will immediately follow with that email saying my buyers hereby withdraw the offer. Please confirm receipt. And then I might even send a text message afterwards just saying, offer withdrawn, please see email, confirm receipt would be appreciated. So it's pretty easy to withdraw an offer. You don't have to fill out any other document. You literally just have to deliver the news, and you can do so in a variety of different ways. But I always recommend people just cover your behinds and make sure you send it in a couple of different ways. So there's really no wiggle room that the listing agent either hasn't seen their phone, hasn't seen their email, like you've done your due diligence. Now, in terms of closing, we know that the sellers want to close as soon as possible. The buyers are flexible. So in a competitive market, right now it seems to be 30 days is the norm for closing. So from accepted offer to closing, 30 days seems to be very achievable for lenders and title companies to be able to make. Let's just say we want to be fast. If you are putting in an offer that might close in, say, less than 30 days, what would you want to do to make sure that you could make that deadline? Like who would you call just to verify that that's acceptable and that can be done?
The
Oh,
lender.
The lender, yep. So before, just to manage expectations too, because the last thing that you don't want to do is have a crazy fast closing time frame that you haven't gotten the lender to confirm that they can in fact achieve that. So let's say we want to go and close in what day? We'll say 25 days and the date of acceptance, that starts your calendar, right? So like as soon as the offer is accepted, day 1 is the following day. So if we're giving our sellers until today to get back to us with binding acceptance, I'm hopeful I'm going to get an accepted offer today. So this is just a fun little tool that I use to help me figure out how many dates. Okay, so that would be a Saturday, August 17th. You don't close on a Saturday, so let's just move things up to August 16th, that Friday. And again, make sure that a lender can accommodate that. So I'm going to say, great news, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. My buyers are able to achieve a quick close. We've confirmed it with the lender. We'd like to close on August 16th. Now, when we get to the top of the offer on page 2, you're gonna notice that the address hasn't carried through, and it needs to carry through to the top of every page. So all you have to do is finish typing up the address and it automatically will populate here on page 2. But just a quick double check, there it is again on page 3. So we're good to go. You just want to make sure that your address is always at the top of every single page. Now, our earnest money, we know that our buyers have $7,000 to give in earnest money. And earlier in our practice, I had mentioned that on average, earnest money typically is anywhere between 1 to 3% of the purchase price. So I'm just going to do quick math here. We're offering $7,000 in earnest money. Our purchase price is $501. So we're offering about 1.4% in earnest money. It's a little low, but it is what it is. This is what our buyers have. Now, remember, when you're consulting with your buyers, earnest money will be delivered within a rather short time frame. So if you don't put anything in line 59, it's automatically 5 days. But a nice competitive offer will speed things up a little bit if your buyers have the money on hand. And I'm going to put, you know what? We're going to deliver this within 3 days. Now, something to make sure your buyers, though, understand. They don't have to have the earnest money ready to go at the time of the offer. But if the offer is accepted, again, the clock starts running in terms of deadlines once it gets accepted. So if we put 3 days in here, that means your buyer writes a check or they use trust funds, which we know that that's what the seller wants us to use. That money is immediately taken out of whatever account the buyer is writing or funding the money with. So just something to keep in mind and make sure that your buyers have money ready to go in whatever account they're going to be using for earnest money. So typically earnest money is held by the listing firm. And if it's not, usually that would be identified in private remarks. So it might be a brokerage that uses a title company to hold earnest money. If you don't understand or if you're not quite sure who's holding earnest money, it's okay to give the listing agent a call and just ask and confirm. Now I got a question about this earlier this morning. So we know that the seller is preferring trust funds be used. So that's electronic money wiring that is done through MLS via trust funds. Somebody asked, well, what do I put then for who's holding the earnest money? Earnest money is still being held in this instance by Keller Williams because Keller Williams is the listing firm. Trust funds is just the method of delivery. Trust funds doesn't actually hold the money. Trust funds just helps us move it from the buyer's account into the listing firm's trust account. Make sense? Okay, cool. Now, if something happens and the deal starts to fall through and there is earnest money that has already been deposited, this whole section here talks about what happens to the earnest money if the deal falls through and it doesn't get to closing. So please make sure you familiarize yourself with this. It's not an automatic given that a seller would return earnest money. So, if you have questions about earnest money, if you have scenarios that you want to make sure you talk to your buyer about so they're aware as to what could possibly happen, you can call me, you can call a compliance broker, you can call the helpline, and you can ask just for confirmation. The next section here, the condition report. So again, it is required by the state that a seller furnish a condition report. If they've lived in the home, they have to do it. Even if they've never lived in the home and they might be a personal representative, they still have to either fill out the condition report or they fill out a document that indicates they reject filling out the condition report. But we know in our situation today, this listing has a condition report. And that listing report is dated. Okay, so it's not dated here, which that's kind of annoying, but that happens a lot. What we want to do is see what day did the seller sign the condition report, because we will need to put that date in the offer. So it looks like our seller signed it back on July 10th. So I go back here to, wrong one. I go back here to my offer. And it says seller represents to buyer that as the date of acceptance, seller has no notice or knowledge of conditions affecting the property other than those identified in the condition report. So this just means the seller, oh, wrong date. It's actually the 10th, because that's the date that the seller signed it. So this means the seller's disclosing things. They don't know anything else about the house other than those things that they've put in the condition report. And that condition report was dated back on July 10th. Now, page 3 is a list of items that could be considered defects. So these are the types of things that the seller should be acknowledging on the condition report. There's nothing in here that you necessarily need to change. It's just on this page, it's just definitions. And then the next section we've got is really our first contingency. So we're here up on page 4. So this section is all about having a home inspection. And we know that our buyers do in fact want to have a home inspection. So we're going to check the box in 193 indicating that this offer is contingent on the buyer having a home inspection. And that home inspection has to be conducted by a third-party licensed home inspector. It can't just be like, I'm going to play home inspector today. It has to be somebody who's licensed. In the home inspection contingency, again, it indicates this is contingent upon a registered or licensed home inspector performing a home inspection. If there was something very specific that you already knew based on what maybe was disclosed in the condition report, or maybe you could have seen with your own eyes, like say, for example, you're going through the home during a showing and you notice large cracks in the basement foundation, or you're going through the showing and as you're walking around the house, like you notice, ooh, this roof looks a little crispy, like it's old. If you want to write into your offer, in addition to having just a traditional home inspection, that you want to get something specifically inspected, like the basement or the roof, you would add that additional type of inspection into this line here. But for our purposes today, nothing looked particularly suspicious, and actually based on what was in the MLS, our roof was put on in 2020. So it's a newer roof, newer furnace, newer water heater. So all those things appear to be in good shape. Now, in the home inspection contingency, we have to indicate that the home inspection and any follow-up inspections that might be recommended by the home inspector, and I'll get to that in a second, and any estimates or any negotiations with regards to the home inspection findings, all of those have to be done and by the number of days that you're going to put in here. So if you don't put anything in here, the automatic default is all of this will be figured out within 15 days. Typically, what's been happening in this market when buyers are indicating that they'd like to have a home inspection, this is usually the time frame that stresses both parties out the most. It stresses the buyers out because they're going through home inspections and they don't really know what's going to come up on the report. It can also be a little bit stressful too for the seller because they're waiting for that information as well. So in a competitive market, if you're putting in a home inspection, I've seen people put 7 days in here. I've seen people put 10, put 12. But just keep in mind that whatever number of days you put in here, that has to, by that time, you have to have the home inspection. You have to have any follow-up inspections that were recommended. And if your buyer chooses to have those follow-up inspections, those have to happen in this time frame. If you need to get estimates for any repair work coming out of those inspections, you got to get those within this time frame. And then you actually need to negotiate as to whether or not you're going to ask the seller to cure, you're going to ask for a reduction in price, like all of that has to happen within this time frame. And I think what a lot of new agents don't realize is all of that stuff has to happen within blank amount of days. It's not just, I have to have the home inspection done in 10 days. So
Kim,
when,
does
go ahead.
it hurt your offer if you, for example, go to the max of 15
No,
days?
not necessarily. I've also seen people go past 15 days. If
Okay.
you think that there is going to be the need to have a lot of people coming in and inspecting, sometimes you're at the mercy of those contractors, those repair people.
Okay.
What I like to do is, if I can, as I'm writing the offer, and if it has a home inspection contingency, I will call a couple of home inspectors while I'm drafting the offer to see, hey, if we get this offer accepted today, what availability do you have in the next few days to get in and inspect the house? And I'll actually include that in my cover letter, in my offer. I'll say home inspection contingency due in 10 days. We have Joe Schmo from ABC Home Inspection lined up and ready to go to inspect the home on this date, just so it shows that you're trying to get this done fast. But it's not a horrible thing to have 15 days. But just know, some people will try to get it done faster. And if you do try to get it done faster, you have to be prepared to get all those follow-ups included, estimates, and don't forget too, this is just days in general. It doesn't mean business days only. And trying to get inspectors, trying to get estimates on the weekend is very hard. So make sure you keep that in mind too.
So let's say that it's not able to be completed in the 10 days that you listed. Can you file like an amendment or ask for more time, or how does that work?
Yes, you can. So usually what I like to do as the buyer's agent, as things get scheduled, I'm giving the listing agent the heads up. Here's our schedule, right? Here's what's coming up. Here are the dates. I'm trying to also show the listing agent, I'm doing my due diligence and I'm trying to get things scheduled. There are going to be instances where we just can't get somebody in for a week, right? So the more proactive and the more open communication you can have with the listing agent, the better. So they know that you're working on things and that it might not be a surprise when you pick up the phone and say, hey, I need 1 or 2 extra days on this contingency. We'd like to issue an amendment to extend the deadline. You can do that. However, in order for it to be official and to get the extension, both parties have to sign that amendment.
Okay, I have one more question about inspections.
Yeah.
So let's say, when I lived in Arizona, when we bought our house, I don't know if it's different from state to state, but basically we waived inspection,
Yeah.
but we still got an inspection. But how it worked there is that we just weren't able to ask for them to fix anything, but we were still able to walk away if it was something we didn't like, if that makes sense. Is that the same here?
No.
Okay.
So if you want to have an inspection and you want the offer to be contingent on the findings of those inspections, you check the box. If you don't want to have the home inspection made part of the offer, but you still want to have a home inspection, whatever comes out of that home inspection, you cannot use as an out in your offer. So this gets really tricky because sometimes buyers write in there, we don't want to have the home inspection contingency. So the offer is not contingent on the home inspection, but we like to have a home inspection for informational purposes only. That gets really dicey because then what happens is the buyer gets this home inspection. They're really locked into the offer unless something else falls through as it pertains to like financing or an appraisal. But a buyer cannot walk from an offer based on the home inspection report unless they have the home inspection contingency checked. And unless they have not given the seller the right to cure, or they have given the seller the right to cure, the seller has said, no, I'm not going to do anything. And then the buyers can determine whether or not they want to give the seller a notice of defect and list all the things that are wrong with the house. I hope that helps. Like I've had situations where buyers have waived the home inspection. However, they want to have a home inspection done on the house. What I've recommend, and they certainly can, but what I have recommended is that they have that home inspection after closing. They still have the information, but this offer, unless you have this box checked, a buyer can't walk away from a home based on an inspection unless this box is checked and they have the right to cure, or if the buyer or the seller says, I'm not curing. I hope that makes sense.
It does. Thank you.
Okay. So in a competitive market, buyers are really giving sellers the right to cure the home inspection. So I'm going to cross off shall not. And really, like, the right to cure can mean a variety of things. You might ask the seller as part of negotiations, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we had the roofer come and we got an estimate of $20,000. We would like you to fix the roof before we close. That's one way to cure, right? To have something repaired prior to closing. Now, mind you, that option, you would want to be very specific with how you want the seller to cure it, and maybe even as specific as, we want you to use this company and it has to be done by this date. So that's one way a seller can cure. Another way a seller can cure is if you say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we had the roofing company come out. They told us it was going to be $20,000 to fix the roof. You know what? We're not going to ask you to fix the roof. We'll take that on when we assume ownership, but we'd like you to reduce the price of the home by maybe $20,000. Or maybe you'll say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you don't have to worry about it. Let's split the difference. Can we reduce the price by $10,000 and you don't have to do anything? Usually it's more attractive to a seller to try to, I mean, they lose out on money if they reduce the price. But it's typically a faster way to cure, because you could be waiting a month or two before you get a contractor in there to fix things. So just something to keep in mind. So if we give the seller the right to cure, and if the sellers, you're going to be having conversations with the other party throughout this, time frame or this window of time. So it's not going to be a surprise to the listing agent when you call up and you say, okay, we've had the inspection, we've got all the estimates completed. Here's what my buyers are proposing. What do you think? How do you think your sellers are going to react to that? Or what do you think the response would be to the sellers? So you kind of have that conversation. You can be talking about things before you put anything formal together in writing. If both parties are feeling good about the options that have been presented and, the listing agent says, yeah, we'll do that, draft an amendment, be very specific with what you want fixed or cured, and you get both parties to sign it and everything's hunky-dory and we're very excited. Now, what could happen is, as part of those conversations or during those conversations, if you can't get an agreement between the two parties, what your buyer can then do, and they have to be ready to do this, is deliver a notice of defect, and it states the things that they want to include as true defects to the home that were found in the home inspection report. So then that's really putting the seller's feet to the fire, and the seller needs to make a decision as to whether or not they're going to fix all of these things on the notice of defect. So typically you issue that notice of defect. If you're having conversations with people and you deliver the notice, I probably wouldn't give the seller 10 days to make that decision. I usually drop it down to 2, because again, we've been having conversations up to this point. This shouldn't be any surprise. But any question that you have, oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. This is line 218, just stating that the seller is going to cure the defects and they have to send that within so many days.
Yeah, so let's read it out. So the seller has the right to cure. If the seller has the right to cure, the seller can satisfy this contingency by delivering written notice to the buyer within 2 days, stating that they're going to cure the defects.
Mhm.
So a notice, and remember too, a notice is a document that is only signed by the initiating party. That's just saying, hey, I will do this. In order for anything to be official and for changes to be made, you actually then have to take that information and put it into an amendment that gets signed by both parties. So if the
Okay.
seller has the right to cure, they can deliver a notice to the buyer within X amount of days as to, they're gonna cure the defects. They could just cure the defects in a good and workmanlike manner. Or they can also deliver to the buyer a written report indicating, here's all the work that we're gonna get done, and it's gonna get done within no later than 3 days prior to closing. Now, say the seller is given the right to cure and the seller is like, you know what? I'm not gonna do it. So what happens then? Well, the offer is null and void if the buyer makes that timely delivery of the notice of defects and you submit the inspection report along with that notice of defect. So the offer is null and void if the seller doesn't have the right to cure. So say your buyers didn't give the seller the right to cure in the home inspection contingency, they had the inspection done and there's just too much stuff on there. And they're like, you know what, we want out. We don't even want to try to negotiate, we want out. The buyer can get out of the contract if they did not give the seller the right to cure. The offer can be null and void also if the buyer makes timely delivery of the notice of defects along with that, including the written inspection report. It's null and void if the seller has the right to cure, but the seller indicates via written notice that they're not going to cure. They're like, yeah, we're not going to do it. Or the seller doesn't actually deliver that notice in a timely manner. So it's the offer could be dead. Any questions that you have about the offers? Every answer is actually in the document itself. You just have to make sure that you're familiarizing yourself with the language, read it carefully, read it multiple times. If you still have questions, by all means, call the compliance broker, call the helpline, like they're here to help. But usually the majority of your answers are right here in front of you. You just have to make sure you familiarize yourself with the offer documents. Okay, I'm not gonna go through the rest of the offer because we only have a couple of minutes left. But if you're going to be submitting this as practice, please make sure you fill out the rest of the offer document. Please make sure using the information and the kind of the direction you were given here. Please make sure you include Addendum A, Addendum AC, if you think that you are going to be including some type of appraisal gap, inspection coverage, or escalation clause. Please make sure you put the signed condition report in the packet. Addendum S is signed and put into the packet. And then we don't have any like fake pre-approval letters, which is fine, but that would be something also that you would put in your offer document. So what I'm asking for is put all that stuff together. If you want extra practice, send it to me as if I was the listing agent. Send it to me by 4 o'clock. And I will give you guys feedback on your documents. Any questions?
I don't have any questions yet, but if I do, I can just email you. Is that okay?
Please. Yeah.
Right.
Kim, I forgot to do the hubby hotline with the submitting everything in like one PDF. Are you able to show me that?
Yeah, I'll show you guys right now. I don't know if the Zoom is gonna cut out right at noon, but let's just
Okay.
be a little gutsy. So when you're in zip form, once you have all of the documents signed that you want to include, so I'll go into like one of my old ones. So I have received and I have all of my documents signed. They're ready to go. what I do is, and yours might look like this, it might look like this, let's just do it like this. You click on the PDFs
You can
that
only
you
see,
want to
right?
merge
Sorry.
in the left-hand corner, and then you hit save as PDF, and you save it as a single PDF. You can save it to the folder, or you can save it to your computer. But that's how you combine them. And you can also move them around too, based on the order. But that's how you do it.
Sorry, we could only see you.
Oh, no. Oh, yeah, because I stopped sharing. Okay, shoot, hold on. That's probably not very helpful. Okay, so I'm just in a random transaction. So here's zip forms, and these are all signed copies that have been initiated through DocuSign, and they've now come back into zip forms. They're all signed and ready to go. In order to put these 4 PDFs into one PDF, I just click. Oh, no, no, no. What did I just do? I'm going to go back to a different one. Please hold. We'll go to this one. So here are all the documents that I need to merge, into one PDF. I'm going to just click the left-hand corner. And there's this thing up here, save as PDF. This will combine them. And it'll combine it into a single document. You can either save that PDF in zip form automatically, or you can just save it to like your desktop. So you would just hit save. But also something too, just to give you a heads up, if you want to move the order around of those documents, you just drag and drop. Make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. If you still need help, let me know. It can get clunky. Okay. Maggie has asked, is the appraisal contingency mandatory when the buyers are financing the loan? No, not necessarily. So if your buyers are getting financing, the lender is going to do an appraisal. By checking the appraisal contingency, that doesn't mean that you're giving permission or you're asking for permission to have an appraisal. What it's doing is if the home, you have the appraisal done, and say the appraised amount comes in lower than what you are offering, the appraisal contingency allows you to try to negotiate the price with the seller. So if you are buying this house for $501,000 and the appraisal comes back and the appraiser says the house is worth $490,000, we've got like an $11,000 difference, right, between what we've offered and what the appraiser has said the home is worth. Your buyer, the lender is not going to give your buyer a loan for an amount higher than what they think the house is worth, right? So the lender now says, we had the appraiser came out, the home is valued at $490,000. That's what we're going to give you your loan for. So the appraisal contingency allows you to go back and negotiate with the seller as to whether or not they would be willing to reduce the price. Maybe you split the difference. If you split the difference, that means your buyers still have to have cash to do that and to bring to closing. But if you don't include the appraisal contingency, and you don't have to, if the home appraises for less than what you offered, your buyer is still on the hook for the amount that you offered. So you might do that. You might not include the appraisal contingency if you know that your buyers have cash to make up the difference, right? This is where, as the buyer's agent, you're providing value throughout, the transaction, but always still pull comps on properties that you're writing offers on for instances like this. So you can tell the buyer, you know what? 2 properties down the street sold for X amount 3 months ago. I'm feeling pretty confident. I'm not the appraiser. However, I've done a little bit of due diligence to see where do I think this house might appraise. And maybe Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I don't think it's gonna appraise for what you're offering, but if that's the price that you want to offer in order to get the house and to win, that might be the price that it will take. But if it doesn't appraise, then you're on the hook for covering up that difference with cash at the time of closing. I hope that helps. Okay, good. Thanks. You're welcome. Okay. Everybody, let me know if you have questions. I will send you just an email again after this with some of the documents, but good luck. Please take advantage of the practice. You can do this. You people are smart. You got it.
Thank you.
Go win it. In it to win it. All right. Bye, ladies.
Bye.